The fleet was a symbol of Earth's military supremacy. Its reputation for absolute precision and dominance was known across the galaxy. Led by Captain Michael Corbin, a man whose very presence commanded respect, the fleet had one mission: protect humanity at all costs. They were Earth's most dangerous asset, made up of the galaxy's finest soldiers, pilots, and strategists. Their reputation had been earned through countless victories, and it wasn't just their strength that made them formidable, it was their resolve. When a distress signal arrived from an isolated planet on the edge of known space, Captain Corbin didn't hesitate. The message was fragmented and unclear, but the urgency was undeniable. There was no identification, just a simple plea for help. The captain's mind raced, considering the possibilities. A rogue alien faction? A trap? Or perhaps something more sinister? Regardless, there was no turning back. Corbin's crew, loyal and battle-tested, immediately fell into action. Lieutenant Andrea, the fleet's tech specialist, began decrypting the signal, her eyes narrowing as she worked through the cryptic code. Sergeant Locke, the combat expert, prepared the troops for any eventuality, her mind sharp and focused. They had fought together before and knew their strength lay in unity, but this mission was unlike any they'd faced. They had no intel on what awaited them, and that uncertainty gnawed at the captain. As the fleet traveled toward the coordinates, the crew's unease deepened. Some whispered that the signal was too ambiguous, too dangerous. The thought of walking into an ambush had been a constant undercurrent since they received the transmission. Still, the captain trusted his crew. Whatever awaited them, they would face it head-on. The planet loomed ahead, barren and silent, its surface cracked and scarred from an ancient conflict. There was no sign of life, no sign of the civilization that had once called it home. Only the scattered remnants of alien technology remained, forgotten, abandoned. As the fleet entered orbit, they sent out recon teams to investigate. On the ground, the search teams discovered what seemed to be an underground resistance, small, hidden, and struggling for survival. The aliens were unlike any they had encountered before, humanoid but clearly not of Earth's lineage. They wore the scars of war, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. When Corbin's team made contact, it was clear they had been waiting for help. The leader of the resistance, a tall alien with skin like dark marble, stepped forward and spoke with a quiet authority. "We are the last of our kind," the alien leader said. "The galaxy has forgotten us, but we haven't forgotten the stories of humanity. You have become a symbol of defiance. A symbol of hope." Corbin's team was taken aback. The idea that humans, with their brief history in the stars, could inspire such feelings in an alien race was both humbling and sobering. The resistance leader continued, explaining how their world had been under siege by a far more powerful alien empire that had spread fear and oppression across the galaxy. These beings had learned of Earth's history, not just the wars, but the rebellions, the resistance, the survival. "The elders of the empire are afraid," the leader said. "Afraid of what humanity represents: freedom, rebellion, defiance. They fear that your influence could spark a galaxy-wide uprising." Corbin didn't have time to process everything the alien had said. His focus was on the immediate threat, rescuing these survivors and ensuring they could make it off the planet alive. The fleet mobilized quickly, preparing for the worst. But what happened next was beyond anyone's expectations. As the fleet worked to evacuate the surviving aliens, a faction of Earth's own officers began to voice their objections. They didn't see the value in aiding an alien race, no matter how oppressed. In their eyes, humanity should be using this opportunity to expand its reach, to assert its superiority. The captain's decision to protect the aliens didn't sit well with everyone in the fleet. Tensions simmered below the surface, and whispers of mutiny began to circulate. Lieutenant Andrea, always loyal but increasingly conflicted, was one of the first to notice the signs. A group of officers, those who had always believed in human supremacy, were secretly plotting to seize control of the fleet. They had plans to betray Corbin and use the fleet to conquer the galaxy, starting with the very resistance they had come to save. Andrea informed Corbin, and the captain immediately ordered a lockdown, but it was already too late. The betrayal had begun. The officers' plot was unveiled in a dramatic confrontation. The mutineers had planned to seize the fleet's weapons and turn them against the alien resistance. The captain was forced to take swift and decisive action. The betrayal was quelled, but the damage had been done. The division within the fleet had become irreversible. The officers who had been part of the mutiny were imprisoned, and the captain's resolve was further tested. He had to decide whether to continue with the mission, despite the internal chaos, or return to Earth and face the consequences of their actions. In the end, Corbin chose to stand by his principles. Humanity, he believed, was not just about strength, it was about compassion, about helping those who could not help themselves. The galaxy had enough tyrants, enough conquerors. Earth could be something different. The captain knew the risks of continuing the mission, but he also knew what was at stake. If humanity was to be a symbol of defiance, it had to act accordingly. It wasn't just about military might, it was about inspiring others to rise against oppression. The fleet completed its mission, rescuing the alien resistance and driving back the oppressive empire. As they left the planet behind, the captain reflected on the impact humanity's actions had on the galaxy. They had done more than fight, they had inspired. The stories of humanity's refusal to back down, even when faced with impossible odds, were spreading like wildfire. As the fleet prepared to return to Earth, the captain realized that the mission had changed them all. Humanity had not just survived, it had become a beacon of hope for those who had none. And as they sailed back toward their home, Corbin knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and Earth's place in it was just beginning to be written. The captain looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of the future on his shoulders. Whatever challenges lay ahead, humanity would face them with the same courage, the same defiance, that had always been its strength. The planet loomed ahead, its surface cracked and scarred, a silent testament to ancient wars. As the fleet approached, Captain Corbin stood at the command deck, his eyes narrowed, scanning the barren landscape. It was eerily quiet, too quiet. His instincts told him this wasn't a simple rescue mission. The distress signal had promised hope, but nothing about the planet screamed safety. The captain's mind raced as he ordered a sweep of the planet's surface. His crew, trained for any scenario, knew that there was something more to this than a typical distress call. Lieutenant Andrea's voice broke the silence. "The signal is still coming from below the surface, sir. There's an underground complex, likely where the survivors are hiding. We've got minimal readings on life signs." Corbin nodded, his jaws set. "Prepare a team for immediate deployment. No mistakes." He watched as his crew mobilized with precision, their movements quick and calculated. There was a sense of urgency now, an unspoken understanding that whatever awaited them was dangerous. As they descended, the true scale of the devastation became apparent. The planet had been a thriving hub once, now, it was little more than a graveyard. Alien structures lay half buried in the shifting sands, their once beautiful architecture now nothing but rubble. Corbin felt a pang of unease. The signs were unmistakable: war, destruction, and a civilization long forgotten. As the team moved deeper into the planet's core, they found the remnants of an ancient alien race, tall, angular beings with dark skin, now reduced to a shadow of their former glory. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes filled with a weary defiance. The survivors were few, scattered, and desperate. But they were not without hope. The leader of the alien survivors, a tall figure whose voice carried the weight of generations, approached Corbin. "You are the humans?" the alien asked, his tone incredulous but hopeful. Corbin gave a curt nod. "We came in response to your signal. We're here to help." The alien's expression softened, but there was a flicker of something more. "You do not understand," the leader said, almost to himself. "Your arrival is not just a rescue, it is a symbol. Your people have become more than conquerors or destroyers in the galaxy. You are a beacon." Corbin frowned, confused. "A beacon? What do you mean?" The alien leader explained, his words steady but tinged with a quiet reverence. "The galaxy has watched you, watched humanity. The way you fight, the way you defy impossible odds. Your history is filled with resistance, rebellion, and triumph. The elders, our oppressors, fear you. They fear what you represent, defiance. The captain stood frozen, absorbing the weight of those words. They had always known that humanity's fight for survival had been a constant theme in their history, but to hear it echoed in the voice of a dying alien race was something entirely different. Humanity's story was now the hope of others. It was a powerful reminder of the impact Earth's actions had on the galaxy. Before Corbin could respond, the ground beneath them trembled, signaling the arrival of more forces. A second, larger fleet emerged from behind the planet's moon, alien ships, sleek and menacing. The oppression these survivors had spoken of had arrived. The elders were here. Without hesitation, Corbin issued orders. Prepare for battle. We protect these people, no matter the cost. The fleet responded immediately, forming up into battle-ready positions. The crew, though weary, were focused. They knew this was no ordinary mission. This was a battle for survival, not just for the alien resistance, but for the very symbol humanity had become in the galaxy. As the alien fleet advanced, Corbin felt the weight of responsibility press down on him. Humanity's fate was intertwined with the lives of these survivors. The odds were stacked against them, but there was something different about this battle. They were not just fighting to survive, they were fighting for something bigger, a future where defiance wasn't just an act of rebellion, but a beacon for the oppressed. The first shots were fired. The fleet's advanced weapons systems tore through the alien ships with surgical precision, but the opposition was relentless. Corbin's crew was engaged on all fronts, using every tactic and maneuver they had learned through years of battle. It was chaotic, brutal, and unforgiving. And then, in the midst of it all, something extraordinary happened. The alien resistance, inspired by the humans' courage and unyielding spirit, began to fight back with a ferocity that none of the elders had anticipated. The survivors who had once been on the brink of extinction now found strength in humanity's refusal to back down. The captain watched as the tide began to turn. Every strike, every shot fired was a testament to the belief that humanity had something the elders could never comprehend: hope. They fought not just for survival, but for a cause, one that transcended species, transcended empires. Humanity's influence spread like wildfire, igniting a fire in the hearts of the oppressed everywhere. The battle raged on for hours, each moment pushing the fleet to its limits. But the humans, alongside their alien allies, pressed forward. The odds had been stacked against them, but they had done what humanity had always done: they refused to lose. When the battle finally came to a halt, it was clear that the elders had underestimated the power of hope. Their fleet, once a symbol of dominance, was now in retreat. The alien resistance, bolstered by the humans' courage, had driven them back. For the first time in years, the survivors of the planet felt something they hadn't in a long time: hope. Corbin stood amidst the wreckage, the noise of the battlefield fading into a solemn silence. The fleet had won, but the cost had been high. The alien resistance had been forever changed by the intervention of humanity, and the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had proven that it was more than just a force of destruction. It was a force for change, a force for good, and a force that would no longer be ignored. As the captain turned to face his crew, he saw the same realization in their eyes. They weren't just soldiers. They were symbols. Symbols of defiance, of resistance, and of hope. And with that, the captain knew that humanity's place in the galaxy had just been irrevocably altered. The mission wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The fleet had barely caught its breath when the tension reached its peak. The mutiny that had been simmering under the surface now burst into the open. The officers who had secretly plotted to seize control of the fleet and turn it against the alien resistance were no longer willing to stay hidden in the shadows. They had watched the battle unfold, and in their eyes, Corbin's decision to protect the alien survivors wasn't a strategic move. It was a weakness, a sign of vulnerability that could never be tolerated. For them, humanity's superiority was not about mercy or alliance. It was about domination. The betrayal began in the most subtle of ways. A few high-ranking officers began questioning Corbin's decisions, undermining his authority behind closed doors. Others, more outspoken, openly argued that the mission's true goals should be to secure control of the galaxy, not protect the weak. The captain's loyalty to the alien resistance was now seen as a threat to the very foundation of their ideals. By the time Corbin received a report of a planned coup, the conspirators had already made their move. They had taken control of the fleet's weapon systems, and were preparing to use them against the alien allies they had just fought beside. The mutineers believed they could intimidate the captain into submission, perhaps even kill him and take the fleet for themselves. But Corbin was no stranger to treachery. He had seen it all before. This wasn't the first time a faction had tried to undermine him. The mutiny was swift, but so was Corbin's response. He wasn't about to let his crew descend into chaos, not when they had a larger mission at hand. As the first shots rang out in the command center, Corbin ordered the fleet to lock down. He knew he couldn't afford to waste time or resources. This was a battle he couldn't afford to lose, not just for his survival, but for the future of humanity and its place in the galaxy. Corbin and his most trusted officers moved quickly, neutralizing the mutineers one by one. It wasn't a fight they wanted, but it was one they had no choice but to engage in. The betrayal felt personal, not just because of the attack on his leadership, but because the mutineers represented something that Corbin had tried to leave behind, the belief that humanity's strength came from domination. He had hoped that this mission would be different, that humanity could show that it was capable of something more than war and destruction. But now, that hope seemed fragile, as if it had been shattered by the very people he trusted the most. In the chaos, Lieutenant Andrea emerged as an unlikely ally. She had always been loyal, but even she had questioned Corbin's decision to involve themselves in the alien resistance. Yet, as the mutineers' plans unfolded, it became clear to Andrea that Corbin had been right all along. Humanity's strength wasn't just in their power, it was in their capacity for compassion and defiance. She joined the captain and his loyalists, helping to neutralize the remaining mutineers with cold efficiency. The fight was brief, but brutal. The mutineers were well trained, and they had the element of surprise. But Corbin's crew was prepared for this. Every member of the fleet had been through countless battles, and their unity, forged through years of trust and shared struggle, was their greatest weapon. One by one, the mutineers were subdued, and the fleet was secured. But even as the mutiny was quelled, the damage was done. Corbin stood in the quiet aftermath, his thoughts heavy. He had been betrayed by his own, people who had once stood by him, people who had believed in the same cause. Now they were gone. The fleet was fractured, its cohesion shattered by the betrayal. Yet, Corbin knew they couldn't afford to linger on the past. There was a larger mission still in play, the survival of the alien resistance, and the promise humanity had made to stand with them. The captain turned to Andrea. "We move forward. We finish what we started." She nodded, but there was an undeniable sadness in her eyes. The crew had just lost part of its soul, and the future seemed uncertain. But Andrea understood the stakes. This was no longer just about rescuing a few survivors. It was about the future of the galaxy, and the kind of legacy humanity would leave behind. Would they be remembered as conquerors? Or as liberators? Despite the mutiny, Corbin and the remaining crew moved swiftly to complete the mission. The alien survivors were escorted to safety, their gratitude evident, though they too understood the price of their freedom. Humanity had fought for them, not out of self-interest, but because they believed in something greater. The message was clear: humanity would never bow down to tyranny. The fleet returned to its mission, but it was different now. Corbin was different. The betrayal had been a bitter reminder of the fragility of loyalty, but it had also reinforced his belief that humanity was meant to lead by example, not by force. The galaxy, once teeming with different species, now looked to Earth. The stories of their resistance, their bravery, and their unwavering hope were spreading like wildfire, sparking a rebellion that would ignite the hearts of the oppressed everywhere. But even as the fleet sailed on, Corbin knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's place in it had only just begun to take shape. The mission had changed them all, and there was no going back. The future would be forged through the choices they made now, choices that would define humanity's legacy among the stars. The captain looked out at the distant stars, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. The fleet had been tested, and humanity had passed with flying colors. But the challenges ahead were not to be underestimated. There would be more battles, more struggles. But Corbin knew one thing for certain: humanity would never stop fighting. They had proven that, and the galaxy would soon learn what it truly meant to face the full force of Earth's defiance. The aftermath of the mutiny had left the fleet scarred, but the mission was far from over. Captain Corbin stood on the command deck, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse of space ahead. His mind was heavy with the weight of his decisions, the betrayal, the fractured unity within his crew, and the uncertain future of the galaxy. But he couldn't afford to dwell on the past. There was work to be done. The alien resistance needed them, and Corbin knew that the fate of both their species depended on their success. The fleet had faced its darkest hour, but now they had to rise. The alien survivors, though safe for now, were still vulnerable. They had been scattered and broken by years of oppression, and Corbin knew it would take more than just military strength to ensure their survival. He had seen something in them during their brief alliance, something that humanity could relate to. Despite their suffering, despite the overwhelming odds, they fought not just for survival, but for freedom. That resilience mirrored humanity's own story. It was a connection that couldn't be ignored. As the fleet moved through deep space, Corbin called a meeting with his senior officers. He addressed them directly, his voice steady but firm. "We've been through a lot. We've faced betrayal, we've faced doubts, but the mission is not over. The galaxy needs us, and we can't turn back now." Lieutenant Andrea, standing at the front of the room, nodded. "The alien resistance is still reeling from the attack. We can't afford to delay. If we leave them now, the elders will regroup, and they'll come for them again. We need to hit them harder this time, strike before they can recover." Corbin agreed. The elders' empire was a vast, oppressive force, and they wouldn't stop until they had crushed all opposition. But the captain wasn't just thinking about the tactical advantage. This was about sending a message, about showing the galaxy that humanity wasn't just a species of conquerors, but a species of liberators. If they left now, it would only reinforce the elders' belief that humanity was weak, that their compassion was a flaw. "We strike before they can regroup," Corbin said. "We show them what it means to face humanity's full might. We'll make sure the resistance has what they need to keep fighting. And we'll make sure the galaxy knows that we stand with those who defy tyranny." The plan was set in motion. The fleet would strike the elders' stronghold, a massive space station that controlled the flow of resources across the galaxy. It was heavily fortified, but the captain knew they had the advantage. The elders had underestimated them once before, and now, humanity would make them pay for it. As the fleet made its way toward the stronghold, tensions within the crew began to settle. The betrayal had tested their trust in one another, but they were soldiers, trained to fight and survive, no matter the odds. They had been through worse, and now they had something to fight for. The crew was united once more, and their focus was sharp. There was no room for error. The attack came without warning. The fleet descended upon the stronghold with precision, their weapons systems locked on target. The elders' defenses were formidable, but they had failed to anticipate the strength and resolve of the humans. The battle was fierce, but humanity's resilience proved to be the deciding factor. The elders' fleet, though larger and more technologically advanced, was no match for the coordinated strike from Earth's finest. Corbin's orders were carried out flawlessly, each move executed with military precision. The enemy's ships began to fall one by one, their shields faltering under the relentless barrage. The crew worked in perfect unison, their training and experience paying off in the heat of battle. The alien resistance, emboldened by humanity's support, fought alongside them, striking back at their oppressors with newfound strength. As the battle raged on, Corbin's thoughts turned to the larger picture. This wasn't just about defeating the elders, it was about inspiring the galaxy to rise up. Humanity wasn't a race of conquerors. They were fighters, protectors, and defiers of tyranny. The captain's mind raced, planning the next steps as the fleet continued to advance. Finally, after hours of intense combat, the Elders' stronghold was reduced to rubble. The station, once a symbol of their power, was now a lifeless hulk drifting through space. The fleet had succeeded. The resistance had been freed, and the Elders had been dealt a blow they would not recover from. But the battle, though won, was only a part of the larger war. Corbin knew that this victory would send ripples throughout the galaxy. The Elders' reign was over, but their influence wouldn't disappear overnight. There would be other factions, other powers, eager to fill the vacuum left behind. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been solidified, but the fight was far from over. The captain's resolve had only grown stronger. As the fleet regrouped and prepared to head back to Earth, Corbin reflected on the events that had led them to this point. They had been tested in ways they could never have anticipated. But in the end, they had prevailed. The crew, once fractured by betrayal and doubt, had come together for a common cause. They had shown the galaxy that humanity was not just a species to be feared, but a species to be respected. The future was uncertain, but Corbin was no longer worried. Humanity had proven that it was capable of great things, that it could rise above its flaws and fight for something greater. As the fleet made its way home, the captain looked to the stars, knowing that humanity's journey was just beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more enemies to face. But Corbin knew that no matter what came their way, humanity would never stop fighting. And that was what the galaxy needed most. The fleet was no longer just a military force, it was a symbol. A symbol of hope. A symbol of defiance. And a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit.